Hi, my name is Wendy, and in this video I'm going to cover all the things that you need to know if you're an absolute beginner learning to crochet. I'm going to cover 5 things here. So we're going to look at tools and equipment, we're going to make a slip knot, we're then going to make a chain and look at our chain, and then we're going to look at how we hold the hook, and then we're going to look at how we hold the yarn. I've crocheted myself since I was a child, and I am naturally left-handed, although I can crochet with my right hand. So when it comes to workshops, which I've been teaching for years now, I can teach both left-handed people and right-handed people together. This is the right-handed version of the video, so if you're right-handed, you are in the correct place. If you're a left-handed person, I'm going to put the link here for you for the left-handed video, and I will put the link in the notes below. The first thing to look at is yarn. I'd suggest that you use a UK double knitting weight yarn in acrylic. I usually suggest to people to use Stylecraft Special DK. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but it's what I've been using for the last 10-11 years. It's really nice to crochet with. It's got a good twist, it doesn't tend to split, and it's very versatile, inexpensive, and comes in loads of colours. So you can't really go wrong with that. I would avoid using a cotton yarn initially because there's no elasticity in it. And so that can be quite difficult when you're first learning to crochet. A couple of little extra tips for you. I would avoid using a random yarn, a speckledy yarn, or a stripy type yarn just initially when you're learning to crochet, because it will be more difficult for you to see where you're placing your stitches. And in saying that, I would also avoid black and very dark colours, because again, you're just not going to be able to see where you're crocheting. So I'd stick to the light and bright, and also light and neutrals is fine. Things like creams and beiges, absolutely great. When it comes to hooks, we're going to be using a 4mm crochet hook. I normally suggest to people that they use just a straightforward metal crochet hook to start with. They come in a wide variety. I'm putting a picture up here for you with different shaped handles. You'll find that there's flat ones, which we will talk about this later, but if you crochet in the pen method, that's quite a nice shape to be holding. Or some of the handles are quite good if you start to get a little bit of wrist strain eventually. Using a handle can be more comfortable. I would avoid initially using the wooden or bamboo crochet hooks, simply just because the ones with the metal heads are easier to slide between the fibres. With crochet, you don't need much in the way of tools and equipment. You just need your hooks and some yarn, and you're ready to go. But you will be needing to have a wool type darning needle for sewing in your ends, and it is very handy to have a few of the safety pin padlock style stitch markers. If you can't get those, don't worry, we can always use a small strand of yarn in a different colour as a marker, but they are just a handy thing to have. And then if you can get yourself a small pair of scissors just for snipping your ends, again, that's very handy. And that is it in the way of equipment. So I'm going to bring the overhead camera now so we can get going and make our slip knot. I'm going to show you how a slip knot is made on a flat surface first, and then I'm going to show you how I make one around my fingers. So I've got my yarn laid out on a flat surface, and I'm going to put my finger down on the yarn about 5 inches away from the edge. That's about 12 to 13 centimetres. I'm then going to take the length of yarn that's leading to my ball of wool, and I'm just going to lay that round in a loop. So I'm going to be putting my opposite finger and thumb through the hole in the loop, underneath, and I'm going to be grabbing that piece of yarn there. So I'm going to go underneath, I'll just give it a little helping hand, underneath, grab that yarn, and then as I pick it up, I'm going to hold the tail end of my yarn and hold the end of the yarn that's leading to the ball of wool, give it a pull, and that has created the flexible loop, which is a slip knot, and will sit on my crochet hook. Now with this one that I've made here, you can see that I've got a very long end. So I'm going to cut that so that it's about 4 to 5 inches long. That's about 10 to 12 centimetres, leaving me just enough yarn that I'll be able to darn in afterwards. So I'm going to take that off the hook, and I'm going to now make one in my hand. So I'm going to lay it across my fingers so that the end of the yarn is along the side of my hand by my little finger, and then I'm just going to hold it in place with my thumb and wrap it around my first 2 fingers and create a cross. So I'm just going to hold that in place, and then I'm going to wrap it around a second time but lower down and hold that in place as well. So I have my top loop, which was the first loop I made, and the lower loop was the second loop I made. I'm then going to take my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm going to go underneath the top loop and grab the bottom loop and pull it up through. And then as I pull this off, again, it's created a slip knot. So now we have this flexible loop that can just sit on our crochet hook, and we're ready to make our chain. We're now ready to make our chain, but before we start, we'll just look at the position of the hook. So we want the hook to be looking at us, a bit like a toothbrush if we were going to clean our teeth. And when we draw the hook back, we want to be turning it down and scooping it backwards. So we're going to have it looking at us, then we're going to turn it down and scoop. The other thing that I'll also mention is to try and keep your finger on top of the stitch on the hook as much as possible. This will stop it from spinning. If you see, I haven't got my finger on the hook. As I take the yarn up and over, the stitch spins round. If I have my finger on the hook, this doesn't happen. So I'm going to take my opposite hand and I'm going to put it underneath the yarn and up under the hook. I'm going to gently grasp the yarn and let go with my first finger, my forefinger. So my forefinger and my thumb are free. Now I'm going to take the yarn up the back of the hook, over the top and down the front. Then with my thumb and forefinger, I'm still holding the yarn in my bottom 3 fingers, I can grab the bottom of the stitch that's just underneath the crochet hook. So if I show you here, bring it up a little bit closer. Now I'm going to draw my hook back through that stitch. So what I'm going to do is I bring my hook back, I'm turning it down to scoop, and I'm scooping it through, catching the yarn and taking it with me. So now I'm going to put my finger on top of that stitch on the hook again. I can let go of the stitch underneath the hook, and I'm going to take my yarn up the back, over the top and down the front. Again, I'm going to grab this stitch underneath the hook. That will give me some support, and I'm going to pull my hook back through. So I'm going to turn the hook downwards and I'm going to scoop it, catching the yarn and bringing it through with me. So I've put my finger back on top of the stitch on the hook to support it. I'm going to take my yarn up the back of the hook, over the top of the hook and down. Grab the chain that's now appearing underneath the hook. If I give it a little tug, not too much, but a little tug, it actually opens up the space under the hook and makes it easier to pull back. So I'm now going to draw that hook back, turn it downwards and scoop it through. And I have 3 chains on my hook. So I've got that finger on top of the stitch on the hook, taking my yarn up the back, over the top and down the front, holding on to this chain underneath the hook now, and then I'm going to scoop my hook back through. So again, it's yarn up the back, over the top, down the front, hold the chain underneath the hook, and then scoop that hook back, turning it down and scooping it through. And this is how we go about making the chain stitch. And this is what I would advise that you do, because the more you practice with this, the more that you will develop your own tension. So now when we look at this chain, we can see that we're looking at a series of V's. Now this is the right side, and when you're counting your chain, that very first knot that's at the bottom, that's the slip knot, and we don't count that, and we don't count the stitch that's on the hook either. So I'm going to count mine. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches, and I'm not counting the one that's on my hook. When we turn it over, this is called the bump side, and this is the back of your chain. So now we've looked at making our chain, we can look at how we're going to hold the yarn. Up until now, we've grasped it in our fingers, let go with our forefinger and our thumb, and we've just fed it through our bottom 3 fingers. So that's absolutely fine, but you probably will find that you want to develop a way where you're feeding the yarn through your fingers with a little more control. So I'll show you the way that I do mine, and then you'll need to experiment and you will develop a way that suits you. So I bring the yarn up the side of my hand, up the side of my little finger, and then I wrap it around, taking it down to the palm, and once again, so that I've got this complete ring going round and across on my little finger, and the yarn is coming up on the front of my hand. I then take the yarn across my ring finger and feed it back through, and then I take it back over my next finger and again feed it through to the front. And then this gives me a way that I can control the yarn by opening and closing my hands, become subconscious of how I can control the flow of the yarn. As I say, have a play and experiment with this, because you will develop a style that feels natural and instinctive to you. When it comes to holding the hook, there are 2 main methods. One is called the knife grip, where you're holding your crochet hook as if you were going to be eating with a knife and fork, and this is the way that I use. The other method is called the pen grip, and this is where you're holding the crochet hook as if you were going to be writing. I have also seen crocheters that have been knitters holding the crochet hook as if they're knitting, which I will show you now. Whichever way you choose is absolutely fine. It tends to be instinctive, and even if you have to modify it in a way that enables you to crochet, as long as you're getting the stitches come out and you're happy with your tension, it's absolutely fine. So just to recap, in this video we've looked at yarns and equipment, we've made a slip knot, we've now made a chain, and we've looked at how we're holding our yarn and how we're holding our hook. So you're now ready to go on to the next videos, which will be showing you how to make the double crochet stitch. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found this useful, and the next videos will be covering the double crochet stitch. So don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!